Today's episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast is brought to you by Poor Richard's Cafe and Star Local Media. Poor Richard's Cafe, Plano's oldest restaurant since 1973. They are open daily from 5:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m., serving the three most important meals of the day: breakfast, lunch, and dessert. It is true Texas home-style cooking made with love and grit. That is Poor Richard's Cafe, located off of Avenue K in Plano. Welcome to another episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. My name is Matt Welch. I'm the sports editor at Star Local Media, and I am being joined by Justin Thomas and Brian Murphy. We got some teams headed to state soccer tournament, boys. It was a busy weekend. We can even just start there. Obviously, regardless of where you were at in the state, apparently, because it wasn't just here in Dallas, but down in Austin where I was at, just the weather was just absolute hell this weekend. So, I know what you had a game that was actually moved from one site to another. So it wasn't even just a delay. They had to straight up relocate your game.
Well, it was because of the delays. Yeah. I think the reasoning for moving it was just so they didn't, for the regional tournament, they didn't have to wait for the earlier game to finish to get theirs started. It wasn't like the field at Boyd was more playable than McKinney ISD. But I think just to speed things up, they ended up shifting it over there. So they go from fancy McKinney ISD stadium to I get whatever that stadium at Boyd is. I don't even
Bronco Field, or
is that where they play their actual soccer games? I don't even know.
They play their games at the high school, at the stadium at the high school.
It did have a press box though, so I wasn't getting rained on while I was out there.
It's got a nice little press box, like a little three-room press box. You get your own little area.
In total,
it's just funny when you go from McKinney ISD Stadium and then you drive 15 minutes.
The $70 million palace to. So how long in total was your game? You're covering the Flower Mound boys, obviously.
It was supposed to start at noon because the South Lake girls game was supposed to be at 10, so it was supposed to start at noon and it was starting at 2:30.
Oof. How about you, Brian? What was action like at Standridge for Frisco ISD?
I had a doubleheader Saturday, Frisco Independence against Highland Park. They were supposed to start at 10. They didn't start until 2:10ish. And Frisco Wakeland and Mount Pleasant were supposed to play right after. And so I'm over here calling Coach Holt over Wakeland because I got word at 9 o'clock. Hey, and obviously if you look out the window, lightning is just, thunder is just crashing everywhere. And so I got a call from people at Stanridge around 9. And they were like, hey, it's an indefinite delay, so don't even waste your time coming up here right now. So I was like, sweet, we'll play the waiting game. And we're waiting, and I'm calling Coach Holt. Coach Holt's like, we're still at Wakeland. We're not even going to Stanridge. Like, I talked to other coaches, some other coaches that I knew would be there. They were like, man, we might get like a 6 o'clock and then 8:30 game tonight. And I was like, well, I hope not, because there goes the whole day. This would be nuts.
That's why it was nice for the Flower Mound, because it was still 2.5 hours late. But if they didn't move locations, they wouldn't have played till like 4:30 or 5.
So then eventually Independence got going at like 2:05ish, 2:10ish, and then there was no overtime there. It was close. We'll talk about that in the next segment there, the heartbreak for Independence, but then Wakeland, they get going about 4:30, 4:45, and good clean game, no extra time, and that was over by about 6.
Yeah, so by comparison's sake, I kind of got off easy. I was, down in Austin covering, the Allen girls against Rockwall Heath, and it was just your typical, hour 45, hour 50-minute delay, and they got started around, 1 o'clock, and everything went off without a hitch, and that was that. Because even when I was driving back, just the weather, it sounds like it was just terrible.
All day it was awful, and then once Independence and Highland Park started at 2-ish, the weather kind of subsided. It was still really windy at some points of the game, but there was no rain. The field was a little wet still, but once Wakeland kicked off later in the evening, especially in the second half,
it came back.
It came back, and with about 15 minutes left in the game, I leave the press box and I go down to the field, and I'm there, and I'm just getting sideways rain hitting me in the face, and it's like it was like 50 degrees, and it was thunderstorming at the same time. It was weird. I don't know how they were playing in it, and it was, I know we were having the discussion earlier, just move these games to an indoor place, or or move them to the next day. Of course, Sunday, the next day, it was 70 degrees and sunny, not a cloud in the sky. Hardly any
Texas
wind.
Weather for you.
But then you decide who goes to state when the wind gusts are 25 miles an hour and sideways rain. So
The thing about soccer, man, is just there's no other sport where the elements can just impact the balance of the game quite like that. And you see it especially during the playoffs, be it wind all the way up to extreme conditions, like what a lot of our teams had to go through on Saturday. But nevertheless, it was far from an easy, seamless day. But we do know who's headed to state. Between the three of us, we've each got a school that we cover that is going to be bound for Georgetown later this week. The Frisco Wakeland boys, the Allen girls, and the Flower Mound boys. They're all among the Final Four in their respective brackets. And so let's just kind of recap what we saw over the weekend and just kind of set the stage for later this week at the UIL State Tournament. We can start with we'll start with Allen girls, one of the newcomers to this mix. Whereas you got a school like Wakeland, which this is just old hat for them by this point. You've got Flower Mound and Allen, two teams that I guess when was the last time that Flower Mound made it to state?
Never for boys.
Wow, there you go. So it's never for boys. It's been the first time in 21 years.
Fought with on Twitter about it, but
for the Allen girls, first time in 21 years, and this was one that was definitely some dramatics in this one. They scored with a little under 2.5 minutes left. Anna Reza does the honors in a matchup that was it felt like just over the general flow of play that Allen was at least the better team as far as generating opportunities on goal, but it was just one of those matches where they just no matter how many times they framed one on, Heath's defense was right there. They got a solid goalkeeper, Savannah Hall, tall, rangy keeper that was getting to a lot of stuff. So they kind of made it a point, it's just tactically like, okay, if you're going to put a ball on frame, go low. Just if you're a tall keeper, obviously it's a little bit tougher if you're having to, go vertically for a ball versus horizontally. So, they finally just got a good look in the box. I believe it was Ashley Williams who had the setup, and Anna Reza puts one low and rolls to the back post, past the outstretched arms of Savannah Hall, and obviously pandemonium ensued. And it was also kind of a much needed goal for Allen, just because not only does it win the game, but there's also the in addition to being under the backdrop of a weather delay and whatnot, Saturday was also Allen's prom. So you've got that to factor in, and that was obviously a little bit tough when head coach Kelly Thompson's having to break it to the girls that they're going to be on a delay. So then you're starting to kind of get concerned with later on that night. None of the girls want to be late or miss prom or anything like that. So yes, to avoid overtime and a shootout, which would have tacked at least another 30-45 minutes onto the match for them. Those seniors owe Anna Reza big time. Just a sophomore coming through in the clutch for Allen, and now the Lady Eagles are bound for the state tournament. They were they were on this stage last year at the same time too, and there was a matchup that did go into overtime, and it was Marcus, that got them 3-1. So to avoid having to relive, those tough times, and now they're bound for state for the first time since 1998. They get an undefeated Katie Tompkins team. So that tells you all you need to know about just the caliber of programs. You have Katie Tompkins and Allen in one semifinal. That one is at noon on Friday out at Is it Birkelbach Field in Georgetown. The other girls 6A semifinal is South Lake Carroll, who you saw earlier this postseason, Justin. Mm-hmm. They're rolling right along. They look like one of the teams to beat.
Did you see what they did on Saturday?
I did not.
They put up a nice 6 goals in the first half.
That makes life a little bit easier.
They're never going to lose again.
Probably a nice sigh of relief after that, with a half like that. They South Lake takes on Lake Travis in the other girls semifinal, and should be a fun one. Feels like you got 4 pretty really this is a good Final Four. You didn't have there's no real Cinderella candidates or anything like that. It felt like Allen was on paper the best team in Region 2. They went on. The stats back it up. They outscored their 5 playoff opponents in the region 17-1, and that one came in the first round against Naaman 4. So that is 4 straight clean sheets as the caliber of competition theoretically should ramp up with each round. Allen just laying waste to that region. Another great performance by Allen's defense. Heath was able to put one on frame. They had a nice cross into a header 5 minutes in that was easily snuffed out by goalkeeper Jennifer Peters, and then from that point on, I don't believe Heath put another shot on goal, and that's par for the course. That's what Allen's defense has done all postseason, and any goal for them is enough of a cushion. It feels like these days with just as consistent as they're playing on defense. But it'll certainly get tested against an undefeated Katy Tompkins team. To have made it this far in the season and not even have a draw on your record, I mean that's pretty quality stuff. And the Houston area is certainly no slouch when it comes to soccer. So, yeah, Allen girls headed back to state, first time in 21 years. Flower Mound boys, first time though, man, and that's to build off of the momentum that they'd showed earlier in the season and to really kind of realize that goal now of getting to state. Just kind of talk a bit about your experience covering them throughout the regional tournament and how you're feeling about the Jaguars now.
Well, it was pretty crazy on Saturday because we mentioned, the delays and everything, and, maybe it might take a little time to settle in and get, adjusted to the weather. It was still raining and stuff. But no, Flower Mound comes out against Grand Prairie and they score twice in the 7th minute. So they didn't waste any time getting a lead, and
it just settles things down so much for the guys. You got to feel like with a game of that caliber to already just strike like that.
Yeah. So Parker George gets the first one, and then Hector Torres comes back a few seconds later and gets the second. So they get a nice 2-0 lead in the 7th minute, and pretty much just carry that. Grand Prairie created some chances in the second half, but Landon Leach was up to the task. He made multiple saves, but all of his saves were, I'm not saying they weren't challenging saves, but they were saves where he didn't really have to move a whole lot. They were clear looks, good shots, but they seemed to all come right at him, and he handled them all pretty easily. So they get the 2-0 win. I kind of wanted to focus more on the semifinal game Friday because that was kind of more of the story, if you ask me. Playing Arlington Bowie, and this is a Flower Mound team that in the second round scored with 7 seconds left to beat Duncanville. So they give up a goal about 20 minutes into Bowie, and they're trailing the entire game. And then here they come with their late magic again. The year of Flower Mound continues. Brock Clayton gets a corner. I can't remember if it was a cross or a corner, but something in the box, and he kind of just flicks a header on, and the Bowie goalie has tough time coming up with it. Kind of bobbles a little, and it kind of has a spin on it and trickles in. So they get the tying goal with 1:45 left in regulation to force the overtime. Then we get to overtime, and about 2 minutes in, Flower Mound gets called for a foul in the box, so Bowie gets a PK and they score and go up 2-1. So you're like, oh man, all that big late goal, and now they're already down. But they come back again, less than 5 minutes in the second overtime period. This time Clayton is sending in the corner. It's a cross, and Parker George kind of half volleys it, scores it. So they're tied. So they end up going to shootouts. In the shootouts, I've never seen this in the shootouts before. No saves in the first 8 rounds. 8 rounds, 16 goals. So we get to the 9th shooter, and it's Aditya Patil for Flower Mound. So he puts them up 9-8, and then Leach gets the save. So they win the shootout 9-8. And I guess another little cool note is in the 9 goals, Flower Mound had 4 players score goals that didn't even play in regulation or overtime.
Wow.
They just came out for the shootout. There's, told Coach Doyle, like, hey, I'm ready to go if you need a shooter. He's like, go for it. So they have 4 guys that scored goals that didn't even play in the match. So pretty cool little trick there, and they get the big 9-8 win in overtime to get to that finals, and now they're going to state for the first time.
Yeah, let's see. Flower Mound's matchup, they draw, let's see, I've got it right up here. They're at 5 o'clock on Friday. They play Alif Elsik, 24-1-1 versus Flower Mound's 19-3-1.
Most famous alum from Alif Elsik, do you know?
I do not.
Rashard Lewis.
Okay, there you go. NBA champion
Sharpshooter Rashard Lewis.
I'm guessing that's their most famous. Maybe they have somebody else I don't know of. But just another cool little note that we were kind of talking when we started our soccer playoff previews about, just how well the teams from my area have traditionally do. So this is the teams from District 6-6A. This is the 9th team from 6-6A that's made state over the past 4 years. So, wow. Or 5 years, 5 years.
Yeah, when you said that it's Flower Mound's first time, I would have guessed that they'd at least, because I just think of that entire area being so consistently solid that everybody in that school district has had at least one appearance in their history. But I guess Flower Mound hasn't been around as long as the others. So
and Coppell and Irving, this is the 9th one to make it over the past 5 years. So
yeah.
Pretty good soccer district there.
Yeah, so we got a couple teams that, first timer, and then Allen first time in over 2 decades. I mean, what else can you say about the Wakeland boys now? This is just like it's a birthright almost that they're in the state tournament. It feels like
you can have your Cinderella stories and your surprise seasons. Man, I've never seen a team, punch its ticket to state and look like they just won another district game. Like after the game, I posted a picture. Of course, they're excited. You know, I'm not saying they're not
just
happy.
Dead inside.
They're just like, yeah, we'll win another championship, and it's no big deal. But I even tweeted out a picture when they're, you know, celebrating after the game, storming the field when it was all said and done, and I tweeted out, I was like, just another trip to state, no big deal for Wakeland. It's their third trip to state, third consecutive trip to state, I should say, fourth consecutive trip overall, third with head coach Andy Holt. What a resume for Coach Holt. Comes from Sulphur Springs, first year, wins the state title. No one expected them to win that year because the year before they lost painfully in shootouts. This is before my time, but I know all about it, you know, covering this Wakeland team throughout my tenure here. And, you know, they lose painfully in 2016. They come back, you know, they lose a lot of guys. They win in 17, first year with Coach Holt. And then last year, the heartbreak of having to go through the gauntlet of the postseason after finishing fourth in the district. They're facing number 2 seeds, literally the entire way. Then you get to the regional tournament. Everyone's a number 1 seed in the regional tournament. And they were just winning nail biter after nail biter after nail biter against like Frisco Centennial and Prosper. This year, it's been a different story. You know, this year it's like, all right, I'm hearing rumors this may be the best Frisco team out of the Wakeland team out of, you know, all 3 of Coach Holt's years. You know, the bulk of this group is juniors. You know, we all know about Mark Barbonis. We know about Todd Fuller. William Hitchcock scored the game's only goal against Mount Pleasant on Saturday. And in a game where it was a rematch, by the way, a regional finals rematch against Mount Pleasant. Last year, ironically, it was a 1-0 game for Wakeland. That one was won in extra time, so no late game dramatics there, but Wakeland did score in like the 69th minute in that game, so it was nearing overtime. And I talked to Coach Holt after the game. He said, man, I'm just glad we didn't have to go to overtime, you know, with the wind and the terrible conditions. It was getting worse and worse in the second half. And man, who else but Todd Fuller on a free kick? It was a set piece. That was the only way anyone was going to score in this game. The conditions were just too nasty, and so set piece, boots it in from 30 yards out on the sideline. Boots it in. William Hitchcock comes in there, heads it in. Coach Holt told me that's the 4th time they've done that and succeeded this season on a Todd Fuller to William Hitchcock header to score on a free kick this year, and they're headed back to the state tournament. They're 22-5 with 5 ties. They play Houston Sharpstown. They're 21-2. Everyone's going to be good at this time of year, but you know, Wakeland really turned it on in the state tournament last year and had some big blots, including in the championship game against Aledo, and then they beat I believe it was Far Valley View. Far Valley View is in the state tournament once again. They play El Paso Bel Air, the team that just beat Lake Dallas, which we'll talk about a little bit more in our next segment. But I believe Far Valley View was in there last year, and they were the number 1 ranked team coming in, you know, from deep South Texas, and yeah, Wakeland took care of business against them. So anything less than a state championship for Wakeland is, I guess, you know, not a successful year for Wakeland in my eyes. So
it's the standard for sure.
And
looking over the topdrawersoccer.com state rankings, you've got, I guess, 3 of the final 4 in 5A are listed in the top 10. You have the aforementioned Far Valley View. They rank number 5, Wakeland at number 8, and then El Paso Bel Air, who plays Far Valley View in the other semifinal,
and
at
so
number 9.
They played in the state semifinal against Valley View last year. They beat them 3-1, and Valley View was coming into that game with just 10-0, 8-0, 7-0 blowouts, even all throughout the postseason. And a lot of people were like, oh no, Valley View, this is the best 5A team in the state, this is the best 5A team in the tournament. And then Wakeland just controlled that game. I believe they were up 3-0. Valley View scored late to make it 3-1. But and Wakeland, they know how to get it done come postseason. It's crazy because if you look at their roster from 2 years ago, you know, their main players, and I was just kind of looking at it, you know, you have guys like Matt Thomas and Cody Seditole and Matt Ribble. Those are the 3 captains of that team, all seniors. They're all long gone. You guys like, you know, Reed Stewart, Cameron Villaney, you know, all guys that are just long gone. Simon Salazar. You have a brand new bulk of guys that are freshmen on this team, and you know, seeing that championship pedigree, and you know, now they're coming into their own. Even after the game, the juniors wanted to take a big picture with the trophy. So they didn't do a team picture first. They did a juniors picture first. And I was like, man, this is a tight-knit group. And I've talked to Coach Holt about that, led by guys like Mark Barbonis, state tournament MVP from last year, Todd Fuller, and William Hitchcock, on and on and on and on. And this team, they're not going anywhere anytime soon. This is a dynasty. I think it's safe to say this is a dynasty right now, Wakeland boys soccer.
A third consecutive state championship would make that very hard to disagree with, which they will have a chance to accomplish later on this week at Georgetown. Had some other schools that were in action over the weekend in regional tournaments. Fell just a bit shy, though, of getting to that Final Four. And we will do a quick line change and discuss some of those other regional finalists after a word from the sponsor. Today's podcast is brought to you by Star Local Media. 14 newspapers and websites with a print distribution of 270,000 homes and monthly page views of 600,000 online. Star Local Media, your community voice for news. And now, let's get back to the podcast.
All right, and welcome back. We've done a bit of a line change. I'm still here. I've moved into the Matt Welch hot seat here in the middle, but Devin Hassan and Taylor Ragland, they're here to talk about some teams that weren't so fortunate to be advancing this weekend from the regional tournament into Georgetown, into the state tournament this weekend. And man, it was one of the teams that we'll talk about didn't quite make it to the regional final like Lake Dallas boys and Frisco Independence girls, and I also have a soft spot for them. They're my alma mater. Soccer powerhouse is what I want to call them over at Sachse. And they got blown out. Devin, what the heck happened to the Mustangs?
I wouldn't say they got blown out. They did lose 3-0 to Aldine. Aldine was kind of one of those Cinderella stories that you see in the soccer playoffs. They're 4 seed coming out of that Houston district, and just caught fire at the right time. And Sachse ran up against them. Aldine jumped out to a 1-0 lead in the first half. Sachse's played close games every round of the playoffs, so this was nothing new to them. I was kind of watching online. I wasn't able to get down to Austin for that regional semifinal game, but they did have a live stream going on that I was able to catch part of. Pretty evenly played game. Like I think with every game around the state, wind and weather kind of played a factor in it.
Sure did.
But they had a couple good chances late in the first half, another one early in the second half, but then Aldine jumped up 2-0 about midway through the second half, and then you start to press. You've got to, kind of change your strategy, especially a defensive-minded team like Sachse. You got to press forward, and when you get pressed forward, sometimes you get burned. So Aldine tacked on a goal with about a minute left to make the final 3-0 margin. But outstanding season for Sachse. This was a team that had to replace a lot of parts from last year. Kind of came together at the right time to make this run. Again, 2 shootout victories in the area round and the regional quarterfinals over McKinney. As is the case every year, you're going to lose some valuable seniors. Obviously, Miguel Gonzalez, their outstanding goalkeeper, Luke Braswell, Jake DeVault, guys that came through huge goals in the playoffs. Those are seniors that they're going to, have to replace. But they've got a solid core. Miguel Abido, Isaac Holkowitz, just a freshman who scored the game-winning goal in the shootout against McKinney. So they got some young pieces. And again, this is a Sachse team you're very well versed with, but it had it kind of a high point 10 years ago, and then it kind of slumped. But they've kind of gotten back to being a perennial playoff team. This is their second trip to the regional tournament in the last 3 years. And, there's no reason to think that that's not the standard for this program going forward.
That high point 10 years ago, that's when I was there when they were ranked number 4 in the state with the TJ Nelson and
nationally ranked.
He's playing with the sidekicks right now.
Yes,
TJ Nelson, yeah, he's out for the season though with a knee injury, which is sad to see. The weather was a factor. We talked about it just a while ago with Matt and Justin. Matt was down in Round Rock. It maybe wasn't as bad there. Who knows? But somewhere where you went, Taylor, it was probably Armageddon.
Yeah, it was really bad. I was out in Wichita Falls for the 5A Region 1 tournament. Lake Dallas, man, you want to talk about not really a perennial powerhouse or a perennial postseason team. Last year, first time they ever win a playoff game, and this year they go all the way to the regional final. Man, it was a postseason especially just defined by resilience and comeback victories. You go all the way back to by-district. They score in the last 15 seconds of regulation and overtime to win then. You look at the game against Arlington Heights to get to the regional tournament. They come back and win that game. Wichita Falls in the regional semifinal. They come back to win that game. They're down 1-0 at the half, score to tie it at 1-1. Wichita Falls scores again. It's 2-1, and then all of a sudden Lake Dallas, explodes for some more late game magic, I guess. But it finally ran out Saturday against El Paso Bel Air, which it was one of those rare regions where, when I was really looking right at the beginning of the playoffs at 5A Region 1, I was kind of like, Lake Dallas and Bel Air seem like they're on a collision course. I mean, Bel Air, I think, was at the time 20-1 or something silly. Lake Dallas had just gone 10-0-2 in district, was beating everybody. I was like, this is a very realistic regional final, and lo and behold, it ended up happening. But that weather, like you mentioned, was something else in Wichita Falls. The game was supposed to start at 10, started at 2, and it was. They didn't even wait for the weather to clear. They just eventually decided, I guess we're going to play in it, because it was, winds steadily, 35 miles an hour probably, gusting to 44, 45, the wind chill, 35, and it was blowing straight, north to south, which is the way the stadium runs there, Memorial Stadium, Wichita Falls. So one team literally could not advance the ball, whichever team was going into the wind, and the other team, it was a tale of whichever team had the wind spent the entire half in the attacking third just trying to score. It was unbelievable. So, Lake Dallas was down 1-0 when they had the win in the second half, and then more late game magic. Brock Pope with, I believe, 4 minutes and 44 seconds left. I remember that because it was triple fours. But Brock Pope scores on some chaos off a throw-in, going with the wind. I mean, the throw-in, it went in the air probably 20 yards because 25 yards at least, and chaos. They poke it in, they tie it, they go to overtime, but in overtime, Bel Air just proves to be too much. They score in the first minute of the first overtime, score again in the first overtime, and then one more going into the wind in the second overtime. And at that point, it was finally lights out for Lake Dallas. But man, this is a team that honestly, I was talking to Matt earlier. This is a team that could be better next year because they lose Carlos Zamora and Jaden Hendricks, 2 seniors. That's it. One in the back and one in the front. And obviously, those are 2 huge losses, but the list of names that they bring back, district MVP Brock Pope, sophomore Anthony Patty, who literally had the game winner in all 4 postseason games until the loss. Like, he had the game-winning goal. One was a 3-0 victory, but he still had the first one. So he had the game-winning goal in literally every game. You bring back Caleb Irving. He was just a junior this year, and Nettie got hurt in the playoffs, unfortunately, and didn't play at all in the regional tournament. Julian Fernandez, Orlando Castro, the list goes on and on and on of guys that Lake Dallas is going to bring back, and I wouldn't be surprised at all to see them right back in the regional tournament next year. Maybe taking another step because, as I mentioned, 1 playoff win in program history coming to this year. Now you're a regional finalist, and you bring basically everybody back. So sky's the limit for the Falcons next year, I would think.
Man, I don't think I've seen one soccer game this year where the weather didn't play a factor.
Nope.
The wind, at least the wind at some point. Every soccer game, it's some gusty winds, and one team has that advantage in the first half. The next team has that advantage in the second half, and it's a tale of 2 halves for the most part.
Not always, because I was at a Sachse and Highland Park girls soccer playoff game a few years ago, and Highland Park had the wind at their back in the first half. Halftime is lightning delay. Weather swirls. It does a complete 180.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, Highland Park has the wind at their back in the second half as well. So it's crazy the way that
Highland Park always gets their way, and that leads me into the next segment here. Highland Park, they've just been a thorn in Frisco ISD's side this postseason. They take down 3 Frisco teams in their playoff run, headed to state for like the 50 billionth time. I had all the stats in front of me during the game when they were playing Frisco Independence on Saturday, and it was just absurd. So they beat Centennial. They beat them 6-3 in the second round. They beat Wakeland in the third round 2-1, last minute goal, literally in the last minute. That game could have gone either way. And then once again, another late game heroic play by Presley Eccles, UT commit. I know you'll be excited about that. Hook 'em horns, a Texas alum there. She might be the best player that I've seen this year, right up there with Landry Corbett of Independence and Gracie Bryan at Wakeland. She is phenomenal. She scored the game winner against Wakeland. She scored the game winner against Independence. It was heartbreaking for Independence. They scored against the wind. They were supposed to have the win in the second half, and then the weather kind of changed, kind of what you just brought up between Sachse and Highland Park. It was just a funky game, obviously. And just like your game, supposed to start at 10, didn't start until about 2:10-ish. And they didn't let, it wasn't just like, okay, everything cleared up. Maybe the lightning and the thunderstorms per se cleared up. Everything was still wet, everything was still soggy, everything was still gusty and kind of rain off and on, going sideways. And Independence gave them a game. This is a top-notch squad, and like what you alluded to with Lake Dallas, they bring back a ton of players next year. Landry Corbett, she scored 35 goals this year, had 21 assists. She's coming back. She's a junior. She also does that cool flip throw or the somersault, whatever you want to call it. They have other players, Ashley Merrill, Jocelyn Kispert. Actually, Jocelyn Kispert's a senior, sorry. Blythe Obar, and then Mackenzie Neely, a defender, sophomore defender, and then the freshman goalkeeper, Kendall Sproat. She's coming back next year as well. No reason that they shouldn't be the contenders again for another district title. And just Highland.
Yeah, that experience though. I mean, for a younger team to get to that
for sure.
And Highland Park, the fact that they were able to play with them, because I've seen people that get intimidated, teams that get intimidated just because they know what Highland Park is and they know what kind of tradition that girls program has over there. But it sounds like Independence didn't back down at all.
Do you know what Highland Park did in the regional semifinal on Friday? They beat North Forney 8-0.
8-0, yeah.
In the regional semifinal, 4 rounds deep, and you're winning 8-0. The other games before that, like I said, they beat Centennial, Frisco Centennial, the third best team in a very good Frisco district. They were winning 6-1 against them before Centennial tacked on some late goals that didn't really matter. They beat Kimball 12-0, first round of the playoffs. It's just, but yeah, man, Highland Park, they are a machine. And the fact that Wakeland and Independence were literally tied 1-1 going into the last 5 minutes of both games, could have gone either way, says a lot about, Wakeland and Independence and that Frisco district as a whole. And I don't expect Independence to be going anywhere anytime soon. They could be making another run just like Lake Dallas next year. And hopefully Sachse can be back making another run next year, making our alma mater proud.
We'll see.
But good luck to Flower Mound boys, Allen girls, and the Frisco Wakeland boys making their 3rd straight trip to state. Our 3 market teams headed to Georgetown next weekend, so good luck to them. That's just going to about do it for this soccer edition. We'll be talking softball later in the week as the playoffs get going next week, and there's a ton left to be played for on the diamond in the softball landscape there. But for Devin Hassan and Taylor Ragland, I'm Brian Murphy. We'll talk to you later next week.